Hi folks, welcome back to Code and Concrete, where we share the latest trends and the stories of trailblazers in the built environment. I'm your host, Matthew Schneider, the CEO at Building Inc. Joining me today, I have Lilian Chen. She's the founder of Proptimal, a platform that makes institutional quality financial analysis accessible to every real estate company. She began her career as a commercial real estate analyst and launched a fractional analyst agency in 2020, realizing how incredibly difficult it was to scale analyst work. Analysts are expensive, hard to train, and often out of reach for smaller teams, leaving many firms flying blind on the most important part of the deal. So through Proptimal, she's now sharing her industry knowledge, operational resources, and proprietary technology to level the playing field for all. Lilian, welcome to Code and Concrete.
Thank you so much for having me, Matthew. It's been a pleasure to be here. I love your podcast, and it seems like both of us are really excited about tech. So super excited to be here, excited to share what I know.
Yeah, we're going to jump in on a few different things. I think analyst work is going to be an interesting topic because in the age of AI, analyst jobs are being replaced for the most part, and that could be good or bad. And I think you sit somewhere in the middle on that spectrum. Like, hey, the innovation is good, but we need to be conscientious about that. That was the big takeaway as we were chatting beforehand. So we'll dive into some of that, the challenges and opportunities. But let's first talk about you. What is your background and how did you get here today?
Yeah, so I think I have a little bit of an untraditional background like many people. I started off as an analyst, and in 2020, I launched the real estate consulting business where I was providing fractional analyst work to a lot of companies. Now, I had to hire other analysts as well. So I've been on both sides of the table. And what I realized is this, I'm going to say it straight, right? Nobody likes to do Excel and PowerPoint. And the people who are good at it, the good analysts, eventually they want to get to the strategic work as quickly as possible. So then now you have to bring in a new set of analysts and you have to train them. And it is incredibly hard to train somebody from scratch on how to do financial modeling and to develop the judgment that they need to be good analysts. So it was very difficult scaling an analyst business. And during the past 2 years, as AI became more commonplace, I found a couple of solutions. I started experimenting with different tools, different workflows, and I found different solutions to make my operations a lot faster and a lot smoother. So this allows us to be able to provide quality analyst services, such as financial modeling, marketing materials, pitch decks, and so on, to more people who wouldn't have been able to hire an analyst themselves otherwise.
So let's dive into what an analyst is doing, because I think it can mean a few different things. There's financial analysts and market analysts. What type of analyst were you?
I was a financial analyst, and specifically I was an acquisition analyst with a little bit of asset management experience. So what an analyst does is an analyst is supposed to help companies or real estate companies make decisions based on the data that they have and to forecast different scenarios, right? So you can think of it as the person who is trying to gather information on your market, on what they think the project is going to cost, how much they think that the property is going to make in terms of revenue and expenses, and ultimately how much it's going to sell for. And then they basically take all of these information and then back it out into a return and tell people, okay, this is the type of return that we're going to have, and therefore this is how we proceed, this is how we structure the deal, et cetera, et cetera. So good financial analysis is going to lead you to better decisions to make sure that the deal is structured properly.
Right. Absolutely. So in short, collecting, aggregating, and structuring data about the deal so that you can determine the feasibility of it, continue your financial projections as the project actually moves along, and then the decisions that you have to make. Hey, we're behind schedule or under and over budget. What happens next? So that type of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it happens throughout the investment life cycle as well. So what I just described is usually part of the acquisition process where people really want to understand their deals before they go ahead and commit to the deal, right? And then afterwards, as construction starts, you want to be able to track your construction expenses to make sure that you're on the right track. And then as the property opens, you want to be able to do asset management to know how much you need to budget for certain large expenses and whatnot, and then to continue to maximize the property's value. And if you're not paying attention to the numbers, you're probably going to end up losing some money.
Right. So more developers are looking to pay attention to the numbers. They know that there's more numbers than they know what to do with. Sometimes they hire analysts, but a lot of them are looking to software now. We know that artificial intelligence and machine learning is really good at aggregating, processing, and predicting numbers, or I should say predicting trends based off of numbers. And it's nice that you can do this at scale, but there are certainly some trade-offs, and that's what I want to start to dive into. Now, before we look at the tools that are out there, there's always this looming question. I want tools. How do I get it? Do I build or buy my tools? So I want to know, why do real estate companies fall into this trap of trying to build their own real estate software? Like, is that a mistake to want to have something proprietary?
Yeah, I think this is something that both of us have a little bit more exposure to than the average real estate company. But before I go into that, I want to say that, yes, I am heavily involved in understanding how AI is going to shape the industry. But at the same time, I have my reservations about AI as well and how much it can do and how much it cannot do. So we'll go into that later. But to get started, I think one thing that really surprised me was when I first started out, I approached a couple of software development agencies, right? And many of them ended up having real estate customers. I told them that I want to build real estate software, and they could list just off the back of their hands, oh, I've helped, 2 or 3 real estate companies build custom softwares. And then I realized, the more that I dig into it, that so many people have developed softwares before. And it really made me curious why. And I think the reason for that is that, first of all, there is a lack of good real estate software. So people can't really find exactly what they need. Then they want to say, usually it's, okay, well, this software does 80% of what I want, but I really need this 20%, and nobody is offering this 20%, so I'm going to build my own. The second is, I think real estate developers, I'm going to speak for GPs in general because these are my target audience. These people are the kind of people who hire other people, dozens of contractors, to build real buildings, right? So a 20,000 software, 100,000 software is nothing to them, right? What could go wrong? So they're very comfortable with hiring people, managing people on things that they may not be an expert in, which leads me to the third part is they think that building software is pretty straightforward, but it's actually a lot more complicated than that. And a lot of times that ends up getting them in trouble because they end up with something that needs a lot of maintenance and they don't spend enough time communicating with the software companies. The software companies may or may not be trustworthy or reliable because they don't have the technical expertise to understand what is good software and what is not, what is bad software. And so they end up just throwing more and more money down the drain to make that software work.
Yeah, and one of the things that comes to mind in terms of a long-term consequence is interoperability. Recently, I was in London for a workshop, and we were talking about data interoperability. You had some deal sponsors there, project managers, and all sorts of folks. They said, well, we developed something proprietary. This is how we do it in-house. But when we have to hand off information to this other company or to this regulator, or someone is purchasing the property from us, it's really difficult to communicate what we've built. We don't have the right file types. We can't export stuff. It's all behind closed doors. And I think that's probably one of the biggest caveats. As the world globalizes and we go online, being able to interact with one another is super important. And so having standardized rails for the movement of information, and that can be very broad. It could be about the actual assets or the markets or maintenance that has been performed, value, the rails to support that, well, they need to be mutual. They need to be communal, or else we live in hyper fragmentation, and that's where the industry is right now, and that's why productivity slacks. So building things in-house just to be vertically and say, well, we've got 100% of our own stack, it could, I mean, it's a short-term solution, but it could be a long-term caveat. So there's a flip side to that question, which is maybe you don't want to build everything in-house. Someone else could do it better for you. They're the software experts, but now you have all of these choices. You have to make another decision about, well, which software that is developed is the best. How do you recommend making that decision and also avoiding overload where you just say yes to everything?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And to respond to your earlier comment, when you build your own proprietary software, a lot of times it doesn't communicate very well with other people's software and maybe even some of your own software. So what ends up happening is you have a very fragmented workflow, and every single step, when you move data from one platform to the other platform, you're going to have to convert it into the common denominator, which is probably Microsoft Excel. And so now you have to go back again to where you started on Microsoft Excel and then start working on the Excel, and you're probably going to have to need an analyst for it. But a lot of this can be avoided if you just buy off-the-shelf software. What I want to talk about, I think, today is when you're choosing these off-the-shelf products, the mistake that people make isn't necessarily not adopting technology. I think this is a widely misunderstood accusation that outsiders have for real estate people, right? Because the common preconception is that, oh, the real estate industry is so slow to adopt technology. They are, slow and not tech savvy and, not savvy enough to understand technology, and they don't want to try, they don't want to change. That is not true at all. I'm going to defend all the real estate people out there. I think some of the real estate developers that I've worked with, the real estate companies that I've worked with, on average, they each have a dozen, if not more, subscriptions. They know what Zapier is. They know what Go High Level is. They have a whole workflow built together, and a lot of them don't even know how it works, but they just hired somebody to do it. And some of them actually know how it works, right? So I want to give everyone credit that real estate companies are actually very, very sophisticated in using technology. They just use different technology from the ones that startups are familiar with. So in startups' eyes, real estate people don't use technology, which is not true. Now, where people really get into trouble is how they adopt technology. Usually what I see is a couple of things happen. They have some kind of deadline, lots of fire drills, a period of time where they're really reaching their capacity. They panic. They go, I need to scale. I need to scale. I need to find a way to free up my time. I don't have time. Blah, blah, blah. I'm burning out. And then they look for technology for solution. Right? So then they think in their minds, I don't want to hire somebody, so I'm going to find a technology. So then they have to now go ahead and spend a bunch of time researching all these different softwares, get on demos, sign up for high, initiation fees, pay sometimes very hefty subscriptions. And then now what they realize is, okay, now I have the software. I need somebody to run it, right? So it's like the software doesn't run itself. So then now you need to go and train your admin to do it, or you need to hire an admin to do it. So then inevitably you have to hire somebody else to do it. And then now the other problem that it opens up is now you have a software that doesn't talk to your other software. So then now you have to rework your workflow and trying to work all these different softwares into something that actually works out as a whole. So as you can see, that can get messy pretty quick.
Yeah, it's a bit of an inception.
Yeah.
There's layers to the whole thing. You think you're solving one problem, you're diving into a deeper problem. Maybe a hydra, I think, is the better example. You cut off one head, and now you have two more heads that are coming after you. You think, well, I'll just get software, but now you have the cost of the software and the maintenance of it and someone to use it, and they still have to apply it. And then you find out, well, it still needs other software, or it falls short here, so we have to export into Excel, like you said. And well, that we fired our analyst thinking we replaced them. Now we got to maneuver and duct tape something together. So
Yeah.
it's really great that you're bringing this perspective, because there is no silver bullet when it comes to solutions or real estate solutions or real estate software. And that's such a misconception, because a lot of these platforms advertise themselves as a one-stop shop, but it's a bit deceiving in many ways. And if you don't want to specialize in software, you're just clicking on the website, and the websites are designed to market really well, gonna get your money.
Yes.
You can be easily convinced that this is everything that you need, and suddenly there's a curveball thrown at you, and presumably unexpected costs. I think that's the big consequence here, that you incur some sort of cost at some point, just because of short-sightedness in the adoption and implementation process.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's people are solving the symptom of the problem, but they're not solving the root of the problem. The root of the problem is that their system were never built to scale anyway. And that's why people burn out. That's why people work so many hours. Real estate people are some of the hardest working people that I've ever met, right? All of them work weekends, all of them work holidays. And another thing is, it sells better if these companies come to you, whatever company it is, right? It's just sales. They come to you and say, look, you are in pain right now. Let's exaggerate that pain, and I'm going to be the solution to your pain. And then you're going to do that. Now, here's the lasting consequence of that is, after you do it 2 or 3 times, you're going to learn pretty fast. I don't trust software anymore. I'm just going to build my own. So then that brings us to the first question again.
Well, let's look at how we can resolve that.
Yeah.
I think that's what you do. Gee, where do we start? I guess how do you how do you tell a real estate developer that their life is a lie, essentially, that they could be looking at things the wrong way, and you have the right perspective? How do you first capture their attention, and then introduce this new way of thinking, a systems thinking, really?
You have to solve the problem at the root when you're not panicking. It's the same thing as, you do not go to the grocery store when you're hungry, right? You want to go to the grocery store when you're full, when you're calm, with a shopping list. So I think that the first important thing is you need to have a strategy. And this is an insight that I got when I was speaking to a digital transformation expert. He sat down and he just said, look, software isn't going to solve your problem. The problem that you have is you don't have a digital strategy. So what's your digital strategy? How does your workflow look like, right? Which parts of the business do you actually want to automate, and why? And a lot of times it doesn't make sense to automate certain parts of your business. And most importantly, just because your friend recommended you a software doesn't mean that you need to adopt it. A lot of times that you can live without. So I say this because I just canceled probably 12 subscriptions and 24 accounts over the past month when I was cleaning out my financials, right? And I realized how much bloat there was, and a lot of it I didn't need. And instead what I did is I used this strategy where I chose fewer software, but more powerful software. I'll give you an example. So one of my colleagues introduced me to Go High Level. And are you familiar with Go High Level?
Well, for the viewers, let's turn them in.
Go High Level they're a one-stop shop. They really are a one-stop shop. Basically, you can set up your website there. You can collect a form so that people can reach you and fill out a form. You can create a calendar so people can book directly on your calendar. You can send out email newsletters. You can schedule social media posts. You can develop a community. You can develop a course. And on top of that, you can continue to track everyone on your CRM on Go High Level, right? So that is genuinely, I think, one of the best softwares that I've ever come across. So then I got Go High Level and I canceled all the other software. that makes sense because now I'm consolidating all these different softwares into one thing that works really well. And then I have another software that I use. It's called Notion. So before I would have a bunch of different places that I store my documents, and Notion is Notion is an all-in-one workspace that your entire team can collaborate on. And it's a project management tool. It's a data storage. It is a note taker. It is a financials tracker, a lot of things. So what you really want to look for are these multi-purpose softwares. Kind of like if you have a small apartment, you need to make sure that most of your furniture are multifunctional and convert for different things.
Speaking of Notion, it's on my second monitor here because that's where I
Amazing.
keep my podcast guest CRM, and I have everyone's information in the questions that I read off. And that's why sometimes, for anyone who watches the show and notice that sometimes I'm staring off to the side, it's because I'm queuing up the next question. So phenomenal tool, I guess a little plug to Notion there. Really, the way that you're approaching this is you're not saying that anyone is right or wrong, but you're offering this digital strategy consultation to say, let's just assess your standing or strengths and weaknesses of your workflows. I guess remedy those weaknesses, the areas of slowdown and fragmentation, and accelerate some of the other areas. So you bring that to real estate developers. Is that your target customer, the developer?
Yes, kind of. To be fair, I think all real estate companies in general, but I have a developer background, so I understand developers especially well. And what I do specifically is not necessarily be a digital consultation, but rather what I do is I incorporate these practices in my own business. So I'm sharing what I've done so far and how I use these tools effectively. And I love talking about tech.
Well, great, because we've got a tech question queued up. So
Perfect.
the workflows, it's very subjective. So it's not like I could ask a question that would say, well, how do you improve all your workflows? Like you have to go in and dive into that on a case by case basis. So I can't ask a question particular to that, but I think everyone's thinking of integrating artificial intelligence somewhere. Going back to the automation portion, we know that AI could automate something, and that means that we could save time, save money, and boot someone off the team, right? That's kind of like the manager's dream. Like, how do I have less to manage overall and rely on more bulletproof technologies because computers don't tend to make errors? But there's a catch, just like all things. And I want to, how do we start to separate the hype around AI versus the genuine value? AI is on every website now. AI tool to streamline this, automate that. How do we look past that or decide if this is actually applicable and a value add to our workflow?
That's a really good question. And I think first is I want to address, is AI going to replace us? Is AI going to replace analysts? I think about this a lot, right? Because what I do is going to impact how a lot of people work, ideally, if I do a good job. But I want to be conscious of that. And what I think is AI is going to automate the parts that are mechanical. And when it comes to thinking, it's not necessarily there yet, where I think it's good enough to get you started, right? It's good enough to be better than a random person that you want to hire if you have a low budget, right? That for sure, that's a low bar. But if you have an in-house analyst already, chances are they are probably pretty smart and they want to move on to do more strategic work. So what's good is you can use it to automate the tasks that are more cumbersome, and you give them a better work-life balance and allow them to do more exciting things like going around site tours, talking to people, building relationships, understanding different types of deals, and solving problems, maybe solving operational problems like I did at my first job. So that I think is a huge benefit of AI, is it allows people to do more interesting work. Now, the dangers of that is a double-edged sword. The dangers of that is that if you're overly reliant on AI, then you're going to get more used to it. You're going to become more dependent and stop thinking as much. And that's thinking is what we do best as humans. Now, let's move on to the AI tools on the market. There's a lot of hype, like you said. And from what I've seen so far, a really good way to tell whether something is hype or not is to look at whether or not they have their own proprietary database. For people who aren't familiar with this, most of the AI software that are on the market today are built off one of the primary models. And you probably know this a little bit better. So feel free to interject and explain, like basically how many of them are GPT wrappers, how AI agent works, and why are there so many AI startups popping up into the market?
Well, it's almost like a white label solution, but wrapper is the term that's more popular in the AI world, where you're taking something that has already been comprehensively trained, because that's actually the most difficult part of putting together an AI model. It's finding all the data, training it, refining it, and the sheer amount of data that you need, these data sets, very comprehensive, or else you get vague or incomplete answers. So what do? We take a model that billions of dollars has already gone into and has been collecting people's information off the internet everywhere for the most part. And then we say, well, GPT wrapper, I just want you to focus on the real estate stuff. Like, give a real estate tailored answer. Well, I guess part of your answer is that it's nice to have the existing database, but I think to introduce an alternative perspective, it might not be specialized, because to use a pre-existing database is good, but you need it to be specific to your use case as well. If it's just a GPT wrapper, they're not real estate experts. Now, if the company is saying we took a pre-existing models and a GPT wrapper and we added some proprietary data from 100 of our best real estate deals and fine-tune this, that's really good to see. That's what you want to see. So I think that's to your point. But then also, on an individual use case scenario, your own deals, what might be true for one deal might not be true for your deal, your project, your property. And so you still need some of your own data. So it's joint effort in order to make these successful. But I took the mic from you. I want to give it back.
Yeah. So basically, I'm going to simplify this, right? Matthew, are you telling me that I spend all this money paying for AI softwares when they're using the same software or same underlying model as GPT or Claude?
Maybe.
Yeah, most
likely. Of the time. Yeah.
Right. That's right. So that's the point that I'm trying to get down to, right? And I've signed up for quite a few of them, to say the least. And for many of them, I couldn't justify the value of having a custom wrapper that just does that one thing that I wanted, because I could just prompt it on GPT.
Right.
Now here's the trick, right? I am pretty good at prompting. I get what I want from GPT. So if you really want to start using AI, start from there. Start getting really good at using GPT. It's free. At best, you're going to pay $20 a month, but that's going to open unlimited potential to you instead of just getting a bunch more software that you're not going to use after 2 months. And the thing about using GPT is the better you get at using it, or Claude, or whichever you prefer, the better you get at using it, the better you get at prompting, the more you can learn. And whatever you learn, machine is never going to replace that, because you're getting the machine to invest in you. You're using the machine to become a smarter, to become a more well-informed person, to become a better thinker. Whatever it is that you're going to take it, you can literally access the entire world's knowledge on the internet right now. And you're focused on, getting an AI software because it simplifies one of the tasks that you have to do in your day. That's crazy, right? Like, that's the scale that we're comparing to. So take a step back and realize that now we can have the internet at our fingertips in a very, very accessible way. And this has never happened before. That's the big picture.
Yeah, I like that. It's a really good answer. And it's always good to tell people to continue to do what people are good at. It's a warming answer in a daunting age of AI, where we fear that it could take over a lot of things. But humans have this phenomenal capability to contextualize things, to learn in abstract ways, which AI simply cannot do. And this goes back to answer the question, if I'm thinking about applying an AI tool, where should that be? Your answer was mechanical. And so that means that if something needs creative, original thoughts and answers that are dependent on context, that should be left to a human, because no artificial intelligence as it currently stands, until we have general artificial intelligence, or none of this AI can actually provide a completely accurate answer. It's only based off of the data that it currently has. And if it's not fine-tuned, like these wrappers, then the answer could be completely wrong because it doesn't realize that what it was trained on was ambiguous or inaccurate data from the other side of the world, and you're asking it something very specific to a local market. And then you need to call in a person, because this is no longer mechanical. This is juxtaposition of markets and thinking about what's happening in your local neighborhood, which only a human would be conscientious about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also adds to another point, right? You talk about data, and I said data is one of the biggest differentiators between a really valuable AI tool and just another AI tool, because real estate data is very expensive and very hard to come by. Real estate is a private market, and many of the data never go online, which is why it's so expensive to acquire. So if you're not going to be the person acquiring for that, you can think of this AI tool with its own proprietary database as something that's like a wholesale, right? They buy all the data, they repackage it, and they make it available to all of their user with AI, which makes the data more accessible. That's the way I like to think of it.
Well, it's a good way to think of it. And part of that is because it's very relevant to what we do at Building. We recognize that real estate data sits in private markets, which means it's probably incomplete, inaccurate, outdated, perhaps corrupted, not machine readable. There's all of these things that go wrong. And therefore, in order to start making decisions, or at least to perform the actions that real estate developers are dreaming of conducting with their artificial intelligence, you need a framework, a method of standardization. You need a pipeline for this data to be collected, processed, structured, trained, or training AI models on that, and then actually getting the AI models into your platform. And we want to accelerate all of that. So I appreciate that problem down to its core. It's very pertinent. And not just for real estate, but for like most industries in the world. And it's one of the biggest roadblocks to AI right now. The fact that this data, even though everything is data, technically speaking, not everything is captured, aggregated. It's not verified. Can we even come to trust it? And that's a big question right now too. AI makes a decision. Maybe they say we have this artificial intelligence model that is specialized for the design portion of the construction process. Well, how can I actually trust that this is making good decisions? Like, what was it trained on? It could have been trained on the absolute worst information, and it's giving me bad advice, bad architectural or engineering insight, and that could lead to collapse. I mean, imagine you say, well, I think I'm getting rid of my engineer, so I'm just going to use this AI, and the AI is disobeying the laws of physics, and next thing you know, someone's hurt. So being very considerate about where our data is coming from. I can't overstate that. It's so important. That's my soapbox. I go around the world and tell people to verify their data.
Take it one step further, right? Just, hey, by the way, you shouldn't trust AI, right? Like, you use it as a starting point, and then you verify afterwards. If AI is going to tell me I can lose 5 pounds by just eating grapefruit every day, I'm not going to do it, right? But I might verify it because it's interesting to think about. But think about it, the way that I see it is, think about it like astrology. It's fun to look at. Maybe you learn one thing or two. Maybe you reflect on it a little bit, but don't trust it blindly.
Yes. Don't use horoscopes to determine your spouse or your business partners. That's for sure. I'm an Aquarius, for anyone wondering. But
that's why we got along. I'm a Gemini.
Let's segue over to prop tech adoption.
Yes.
And we talked a little bit about this. We said it's slow. You said, well, part of it is that people actually do like to adopt technologies, but they have all of these different technologies. So maybe just to double click on how to improve what's structurally broken about the adoption of technology in real estate. What do you think is that major glaring issue, and what would be not a Band-Aid fix, but how do we fix this at its core? It's
Do you
kind of
want to talk about
open-ended.
the supply first, or do you want to talk about the demand first? Because both of them have problems that are very difficult to solve.
When you say supply and demand, you're saying supply, software supply, all the solutions out there, and then demands being the people who are going to buy it.
Yes.
Let's start with supply side.
Okay, so let's start with supply. We're going to have to talk about the startup ecosystem here. And I'm from the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, went to Berkeley. So many of my high school friends have gone on to become startup founders, a few running billion-dollar companies, but that's a completely different world from what the real estate world is like. So that being said, I think a huge part of the frustration that we have as an industry towards the startup world is that they don't understand how the real estate industry works. And a lot of times you get this very familiar narrative where a startup person comes into real estate and say, well, you guys are slow on adoption, and I think there's tremendous potential in real estate because it's undisrupted, and I'm going to come and innovate and disrupt the whole industry. You laugh because it's true, right? People
I've said
say
it.
that. And I probably did at some point, right? But that's uninformed optimism, and we've all done that at some point, right? Because it just seems like massive upside potential. It's like the Wild West. Clearly, that doesn't work, right? Why? The reason for that is tech people tend to look at the world as engineers. They see a problem, they solve the problem in a very logical way. But real estate is a very messy industry with a lot of unspoken rules and the particularities of how people work, and everyone likes to work their own way. There's many, many layers to how people do business. So that's very hard to understand if you're not a founder who is from real estate. Now, layer in another problem, which is in the past. And I'm not talking about the past 5 years. Let's say the past, anytime before the past 2 years. It is very expensive to build a startup. It is very expensive to build software. So bootstrapping, which means that you're not raising money from investors, it's unheard of, or it's very hard to do, right? The only people who bootstrap in the past get this terrible stigma where, oh, you only bootstrap if you can't raise investor money. All the people went and raised investor money, got fantastic valuations. And that was, when tech was a little bit hotter than it is now. And so now we talk about another layer of complexity, which is the differences in incentives between the venture capital investors, the PropTech companies, and the real estate companies. What the VC playbook typically works like is they want you to go for the most expensive customer that you go for. So in most industries, how it works is that the startup is going to go and try to get institutional clients, because most industries are shaped like an upside down pyramid, where if you can get the top few players, you're pretty good. You're in a good position. In real estate, it's a complete opposite. Real estate is more like a right side up pyramid, where you have very few companies on top who are doing very large institutional deals, and the majority of players are in the smaller middle market. So if you're a technology company trying to service real estate, you're going to go and shoot for the top of the pyramid and leave everyone else out. That's a problem with supply.
And demand.
The demand, that gets complicated as well. Real estate is an industry where, again, there's a lot of layers of complexity. And a lot of times, you can't learn real estate or how to run a real estate business by reading a textbook or attending a course in college. I did that. And when I entered the real estate industry, I still knew nothing, right? Absolutely nothing. So obviously, in order to understand how things work and how to do things, you need somebody to mentor you. You need somebody to guide you. So if you're a founder who is not from the real estate industry and you come in, you go and talk to a bunch of brokers or real estate developers or lenders and say, hey, by the way, I know nothing about industry, but I'm very eager and I want to solve the problems. People are going to say, well, good luck. I'll give you half an hour at best, but I'm not responsible for educating you on everything. Right. And a lot of times they have all these specific needs that they don't have the opportunity to express to somebody else who doesn't know what they're up to.
Could we rephrase that a little bit? Like, just for my own understanding. So the real estate developers don't know how to express what portion, like the problems that they're facing as they grow and scale, or?
You know nothing about what different softwares can do, right? It just all seemed like a black box. And this was the experience that I had when I first started is I didn't know which frameworks there are. I didn't know the differences between different frameworks. I didn't know how to structure the architecture of my software, and I didn't know what each of the software, which each of the component does and what it's capable of doing. So if I don't know what's capable of doing, how am I supposed to build it?
Right. Okay, so you don't know what you don't know, and most people in real estate are in that situation, and that's because it's sort of the Wild West. You're left to your own devices. You go out, you start a company. Some people build properties because they have a trust fund, and they're able to hire people, and the rest is history. Others have to scrape together the best software and raise some capital, and then they're in the field, like doing some of the electrical too, right next to the subcontractors, and you learn a lot about how to build a property, and then maybe you infuse that into the next development. So there's really no rule book, and therefore there's no standardization. There's no expectation of what sort of software you should be using, because somebody probably succeeded at scale not using software or technology of some sort in that area. That sets a precedent. So it's like, do we use software? Has anyone used software? Should there be? What do I do? And there's also no benchmarks to say, well, all of the best real estate developers are using software exactly at this point, and they are seeing 50% greater productivity and cost savings, and therefore it becomes the new standard that everyone does that. The only relevant example, I think, is like building information modeling, or BIM. Mm-hmm. Now everyone says, if you're going to design a property, hop on Autodesk Revit. That's like part of the playbook now. Other than that, the rest is figured out on your own, and then I'll just kind of go through it. Maybe I'm using Notion, or maybe there's a specialized tool for that. I guess my interpretation of that is that you bring some sort of playbook to the developers. Is that what you're working on?
Yeah.
In some way?
What I'm working on is I am using software in my own company. We're developing our own proprietary technology so that we can offer services to people and some tools and resources to people at a much more affordable price than your typical service company, right? And the reason for that is people want to be able to do things their own way. There are people who are more strapped on cash, so they can use templates and be able to learn how to do things themselves. And there's people who want to just outsource everything, and they're happy to pay for it because they don't have time. So the offer that I'm building is going to allow people to choose what they need based on the stage that they're at and their unique needs as well. And to go back to the previous point, right? How do you figure out how to build a software? I think a better analogy, building a software without understanding tech is like building a house but not understanding how to build a house. I mean, I can draw a picture. If you told me, oh, how would I build my ideal dream house? I'm going to draw a picture. I'm going to tell you which color doors I want, which color roof I want, what the layout is going to look like. But am I going to tell you what a 3x4 does? I have no idea. I have no idea how to tile. I have no idea how to install circuits and installation. When you are trying to build software and manage people to do software, if you don't have any idea on how it actually works, you sometimes end up with suboptimal solutions just because you don't know what's possible and how it works with the rest of your system. That being said, a lot of people might disagree with me and say, well, yeah, I actually ended up building the software and it worked just fine. Yes. But how do you know that you're not using the best tools available?
Right. It's circumstantial. And another analogy that I thought of was you're offering or would like to, and I think all of us that want to improve the industry offer a roadmap to these developers. You're at point A, you need to get to point Z. Here's a couple different routes based off of your team, your expertise, your capabilities, your budget. And the route one is always going to be different, but the destination might be different as well. And this goes back to what I was saying. Some people just hire their way through a development and they never have to rely on software to be strategic and cunning and save money. And that's like saying, well, why don't you use a car to get to your destination? Because we're climbing a mountain. We couldn't. And it's the same thing with real estate development. We have to be very proactive. Every stage of the life cycle of the property, you have a myriad of options in front of you. Do we hire someone? Do we use the software solution? Do we build our own software? And then how does that connect to stage number 2? Because if you start building software, you have to continue to build software because maybe it doesn't integrate with pre-existing solutions. Or you've built something, now you need to hire someone at the next phase of the property. And there's just this constant navigation that has to occur to successfully leverage technology, not just one development, but in your portfolio at large.
It's a monster that you have to feed. It's going to grow larger and larger and larger until you can't control it anymore. But it doesn't have to be that way.
That's right. Look at these analogies. That's okay. I think it's a really phenomenal way of visualizing it. And the roadmap in particular, I just wish that there was more of that in real estate. We set out these expectations. Build a property. How? Well, we're not going to tell you, but there's for sure you're going to learn if it's wrong.
Yes,
it's like,
exactly.
That's not good. And it's like that way with policy too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, look, I can't tell people how to run their business, right? I can recommend certain tools and I'll fill in with service and my own proprietary technology when I can. And to be honest, here's another insight. Many real estate people don't want software. They want somebody to do it for them. And this is why we continue to provide service, is because a pure technology play just isn't going to work.
For now, I bet the more visionary people would say agentic workflows are going to take over the people, but we're just not close enough to that. And again, in something like real estate, saying, well, we can get rid of the people and bring in the AI. The AI doesn't have any data to be trained on for these specific properties, unless there's a startup out there that is collecting and verifying data for this purpose. But other than that, it's just too science fiction. It's very narrow. The capabilities of these softwares are, generally speaking, narrow, or even if they exist, they're only tools and you still need someone to hold and handle the tool at the end of the day. Exactly. Well, that's probably enough analogies for now. Lilian, I want to give you a call to action. So you're laying out this framework for folks so that they can find signal in the noise. Oh no, I've used another analogy, but that's one of my favorite ones, right? We need signal in the noise, and you're offering that. So much going on. I'm not sure what my next steps are supposed to be. You're offering this to real estate companies, real estate developers, which more on the development side are generally who tune in here. But how can folks get involved with you, and what does that working relationship look like?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So I post a lot on LinkedIn. I post about a variety of topics, whether it be real estate, entrepreneurship, or technology. You can follow some of my insights there, and I tend to be pretty honest about what I think. So hopefully some refreshing insights that you're not going to get a lot. And then what I also do in Proptimal is we currently focus on 3 main areas. So if you have any financial analysis needs, or if you have marketing and presentation needs, or if you just want to get on one-on-one calls with me for some advisory calls, we have that as well. more offers are going to be coming in the near future. By the time that this episode landed, I'm not sure where it's going to be, but just check us out at proptimal.com for the latest offer.
Cool. Well, fortunately, I've got links to your LinkedIn, your Substack, and your website, which are going to be in the show notes for this episode. I highly encourage people to scroll on down, click on that, reach out to you, connect with you on LinkedIn for the insights or to get involved, because there's definitely a new generation of perspective and entrepreneurs who want to fix some of these very legacy issues that exist in this industry. And sometimes it just takes a decade of a new way of thinking and people saying, I'm fed up with all the trouble. We got to do something different. It's time to roll out a real solution. It's not just about the money or not relying on influence from market incumbent. Like let's do things the right way. And I think that's one of the most resounding themes from the guests that I have on. This can be the decade or the century that we do things right. We got to be thinking that way. Anyways, off my soapbox, I want to thank you, Lilian, for coming on the show, talking about how to properly adopt all this technology into a real estate portfolio, things to think about, because there's definitely some challenges and opportunities in adoption. And a big thank you for everyone who tuned in. If you want to see more of that, and if you want to support guests like Lilian, got to give 5 stars on wherever you're listening to this, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and a thumbs up and a subscribe on YouTube if you're watching this. Highly encourage that for our growth, and I appreciate that as well. So, Lilian, thank you for coming on, and hopefully we can be reconnected in the future sometime.
Thank you so much for having me, and hope you all enjoyed. If you have any thoughts, agreeing or disagreeing, I would love different perspectives. Shoot me a message, and thank you for having me on again. Really enjoyed this.
My pleasure. All right. Well, take care now.
Take care.